I'm Whitney.
I'm Mindy.
And I'm Deb.
We're three best friends who love nerdy things.
Well, some people think we're nerdy, but we think we're pretty awesome.
This is our nerdiest thing.
Hello, fellow nerds, and welcome to our nerdiest thing. Today we are discussing the Netflix miniseries Midnight Mass, episodes 1 through 3. This podcast is spoiler friendly, so listen with care. Before we get into it, Deb, will you please talk about our nerdiest cocktail?
Yes, tonight's drink is named Crock Pot Luck. I can't. It's like a tongue.
It's a riddle.
It is Crock Pot Luck Punch. Which is like such a funny thing to name. Like that's such a church city name for like a picnic.
Yes.
Everybody bring your crock pots. Now for the record, I love a crock pot. I make soup all the time. But this drink is called Crock Pot Luck Punch. And it's themed after miraculous healing. And this drink pairs well with being on parole, high school sweethearts, and living on the smallest island ever. It may cause confusion about what an angel actually is. And it's a little bit of a vodka cranberry with some splash of lime sparkling water. It's delicious.
Yeah, there's a cocktail called the Cape Codder.
Yeah.
Which I had never heard of. And I was like, well, look at this, New England.
Yeah, that's what a Cape Codder is cranberry
delicious.
vodka. You could just call it a cranberry vodka with lime.
Well,
But
Cape Codder sounds more fun.
Yeah, it does. I wonder if it's also themed after confusion about what an angel actually is.
I'd like for somebody to say Crock Pot Luck Punch after we've had a few of these.
We can't do it before we've had any.
I couldn't do it sober, so
This is just not great.
So at the end of this episode, let's see who can say it. Who can spit it out first.
All right, let's do the nerdy and dirty recap. Mindy, whose turn is it this week?
I've spun the wheel, and it's Whitney.
It's me.
Sucker. I'm so glad it hasn't been me in a while. I'm so happy.
I'm excited that it's me because I really like this show, so I'm excited. So I did do a happy medium of preparation this time.
Oh, so not
I didn't
just
overly prepare, and I didn't not prepare at all. I did prepare a little bit. So,
well, Mindy, I was actually listening to the episode right before this. I was sending edits to my husband, and Mindy, you didn't make it to number 10. But your number 10 had
it was like
8 sentences.
It was like a paragraph.
8 more facts.
You were like, just say it. And I'm like, okay. And like 5 minutes later, I was done.
It was so long.
I was like, I think that was 25 facts.
Yeah, it definitely was.
All right,
All
let's
right.
go, Whitney. Let's see what you can do.
Riley goes back to his tiny island hometown after serving 4 years in prison for killing somebody while driving drunk. Womp womp. Everyone on this island is super big Catholic churchgoer, except for the people who are socially outcast. There is a new young priest replacing their beloved super old priest, and he's got a weird ass trunk with him. Number 4, a bunch of dead cats show up on the shore. That's pretty weird. Number 5, Father Paul is actually doing a really great job relating to the people and being respectful to Riley and the other non-churchgoers and non-believers. Number 6, Father Paul seems like he just healed Lisa from being paralyzed, ? And now everybody wants to come to church. Number 7, Bev is a bitch. Everyone hates her, and she killed Joe's dog, I'm pretty sure. Number 8, everyone is hearing bumps in the night, and it's spooky AF. Number 9, Father Paul gets sick and dies in front of Bev, the mayor, and his wife, and Sturge. And then Father Paul comes back to life and is revealed to be Father Pruitt, who found a vampire in Israel, but thinks it's an angel of the Lord.
Nice.
Right on it.
Yeah, that was perfect.
Thank you.
I mean, I like how he just goes, well, yeah, this demon just sucked all my blood out. I bet it's an angel.
This angel
It has wings, so it must be an angel.
I don't think he ever went to demon. He went
Never.
straight to angel.
Straight to angel.
Right. He's
straight to angel.
His eyes glow in the dark. He can't go in the sun.
He's got
sucked
big
all
ass
my
wings.
blood. He killed me. He has no hair.
He looks super scary.
Right. He must be an angel.
But I was sore
Right.
afraid, so it has to be an angel.
Sore afraid.
He was sore afraid. So was everybody else.
I know.
Oh, man. We'll get into it. Mindy, before we get into it, will you please share our
Stop saying
nerdiest?
get into it because we're not doing a smut.
We're gonna get into
You're getting me all excited.
it. The angel wants to get into it. does.
That's why this is some monster smut I cannot get behind.
Yeah, me either.
Oh man! In a couple of weeks, we can talk about vampirism being a metaphor for sex, and talk about that with this whole series. But anyway, before we do that, though, Mindy, will you please do our nerdiest vocabulary?
Bringing it back to Catholicism.
And not monster smut.
I was very curious about the word chasuble, which is what Bev calls the garments that I don't even know what to call them. Is it?
Pardon me, you're wearing gold and you should be wearing green. Fuck off.
I know. I was like,
Bev is the worst.
I know. I'm like, dude, chill out. You're wearing white after Labor Day.
Call him Father Paul. Oh man, Father Paul. We can call him Father Paul.
I just called him the father because I can't ever. They are not good on the show about reminding us what people's names are.
Yeah.
So there are several times where I'm like, that one lady with this.
Yeah.
Well, it's like sometimes I call him Monsignor, but he's not really, but he is. Anyway, we'll get to that. So this word, it comes from the French chasuble, it's the way it sounds, and the Latin casula, both of which mean little hut or cottage house, which I was like, where
That does
then
not make sense.
did they come up with this? So the name was given to these vestments worn by men of the cloth because the hooded garments looked like little houses.
What?
Right. Yeah. So that's where it came from. And I wanted to dive a little bit more into it because, as Bev points out, certain colors are typically worn during certain time periods.
Yeah.
She was super bitchy about it, but it really is a thing. So
She's the equivalent of, I don't mean to be rude,
oh
but
yeah,
like,
she is.
No, she
something.
doesn't care.
no, here's
to
the thing
be-
though. If you
to be
say
rude.
that, you're
being
say it,
rude.
right?
Yeah.
But
Not to be racist.
all her
Yeah.
things is like, what does she go? Well, pardon me.
Yeah,
That's
I
like
hate her.
That's like you saying like, I don't mean to be rude.
Yeah.
It's the uptight, pearl clutcher equivalent of I don't mean to be rude.
She's the ultimate Karen.
Yeah, I want to kick her.
basically.
I want to kick her in the cooter.
I think so does everybody else.
I would wholeheartedly back you up on that.
We could do a whole episode on how much we hate Bev.
I know, right?
We should. Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's okay. So quickly, I'm just going to go through some of these colors. So green is worn during ordinary time, which she suggests. Ordinary time is actually, and I did not know this, the stretch of time between Christmas and Easter, and then conversely between Easter and Christmas. So basically most of the year, except Christmas and Easter.
Yeah.
It symbolizes hope and the life of each new day. Then purple is worn during Advent and Lent because it symbolizes penance, preparation, and sacrifice. White or gold, which is what he was wearing, are actually only worn on Christmas and Easter. So they symbolize the birth and resurrection of Christ.
And we're supposed to believe him when he says he was like so out of it with dementia he didn't know where he put it, right?
Right.
Like you're supposed to believe that.
Yeah.
He wasn't like, I just came back and so this is as important as Christmas.
I don't know, though. Like, I still don't understand why. Was it just to piss Bev off? Like, was it to see
No.
if... Okay.
It was, he was wearing it because to him, he was starting like the new resurrection.
Okay. That's what I thought.
That
Okay.
makes sense. So exactly what you were saying.
So it's
like
bit
a-
of an
a
ego
new-
there, Father
Yeah.
Paul.
A new Easter
Just a
kind of
little
thing. Yeah.
So they also wore rose-colored vestments, and they're specifically worn on, this is very specific, on the third Sunday of Advent and the fourth Sunday of Lent to remind Catholics of the joy in Christ during times of penance and worship. Red is symbolic for passion and blood and is worn during the Feast of the Martyrs, Good Friday, Palm Sunday, and the Pentecost. So I kept like, as we're watching through this, I'm like totally noticing these colors, by the way.
Yeah.
And then finally, blue is only worn on one day every year, and that's the Feast of Mary, but it didn't say why and what the symbolism is
What's
for that
the
one.
Feast of Mary?
And I don't even know what the Feast
The
of Mary
Feast of Mary is a Catholic holy day, but I don't know exactly what I don't even know. I assume that it's like the Virgin Mary, Mother of Jesus Mary, but there are a couple of other important Marys in the
there's
New
Mary
Testament.
Magdalene and
Yeah, well, and there's Mary, like Lazarus' sister, Mary.
And I do want to go ahead and say, just for the listeners, none of us are Catholic.
Right.
And
Correct.
so if we say anything that is offensive or incorrect, like, please feel free to like shoot us a message.
'cause-
But
Yeah, 'cause we just
we're-
don't know.
we're really
Know better,
just
do
talking-
better.
Right. We're just talking about the show.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, we don't have any issues with Catholicism or anything like
It did
that.
just hit me, though, kind of as I'm reading it, blue is typically the color for Mary, the Virgin Mary. She's usually depicted in blue.
in blue. Yeah, I
yeah,
guess that's
that's
true.
So that would make sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if anyone can give us
Yeah,
more info,
I'd
on
love
the
to
Feast
know
of
why.
Mary.
yeah. I don't know what the Feast of Mary
Yeah.
would be. I'm not sure. But, well, thank you.
You're welcome.
I did a little deep dive into some Catholicism / Catholic theology, because again, I am not Catholic, so I needed to understand some of these things. Obviously, a huge component of midnight mass is the church, right? St. Patrick's. It's the only church on the island. There are less than 200 people. I think it said 127 people live on this island. So basically, everybody goes to St. Patrick's. The people who don't, Joe, Sheriff Hassan, his son Ali, even Riley, the people who don't attend church, they're very much the outsiders, right? They're considered to be outsiders and to be, especially by Bev, lesser than, because they're not going to church or believing or whatever. You know, one of the most important main characters is the priest. So obviously religion and Catholicism specifically is super important to the show. Kind of piggybacking off of what you were talking about, Mindy, the liturgical calendar. I wanted to talk about that a little bit.
I'm going to have a lot of questions.
That's
honestly.
fine. I may or may not have answers.
I don't know what a liturgy is.
I'm going to tell you.
Great. Thank you.
So the liturgical calendar is basically the name for the church calendar. Year round, there are religious holidays that get observed. The biggest ones, like you were saying, Mindy, are Easter and Christmas. And there are certain types of worship or certain types of services that happen on those holidays and leading up to those holidays. And that's what liturgy is. So it's the specific type of service, the order of things that you do in those services, the types of prayers, the songs that you sing. Like there's a very specific worship service that's supposed to happen on Easter.
Okay.
That is the like liturgy of Easter.
I'm going to go ahead and say, because I've watched ahead on this show, they don't do the right service on Easter.
No, they don't.
No, they don't.
They super don't. Super don't. These special times leading up to holidays and on holidays themselves, they have specific names in the liturgical calendar. Those weeks or months where you aren't leading up to a holiday is, like Mindy was talking about, ordinary time. So in the show, you have Bev at the end of the first episode pointing out Father Paul, like you were talking about, is wearing the wrong color. There are certain colors to be worn, certain prayers to be said, certain rituals that you're supposed to do on different specific days throughout the liturgical calendar, right? So we're following through Lent in the show leading up to Easter, which they super do incorrectly. They do super incorrectly. They super do. So in the Catholic Church, you actually have a continuation of Christmas at the beginning of January, leading up to a holiday called Epiphany in the first week or so of January. Then you have ordinary time until Lent, which begins on Ash Wednesday, which we see them doing Ash Wednesday services in the show.
Do you guys know, what were they burning before Ash Wednesday?
Probably incense.
Oh, okay. I was wondering, because they're like outside burning something, and I didn't know what it was.
I know they have to burn something specific to make the ashes. They have to do like a consecrated something, but I don't know exactly what it is.
Okay. Again, if someone can tell us, that would be lovely.
I'm sure somebody can. I feel like I should know because I grew up in a super Catholic town. I just am not Catholic, so I feel like I should have absorbed it by osmosis, but I didn't. Okay, so Lent leads up to Easter. There are actually several weeks of Easter observance in the Catholic liturgical calendar. I looked it up for like the 2024 calendar. There were multiple like Easter services, which I was kind of confused about, but those lead up to Pentecost, which is what you mentioned, Mindy, which happens about a month or so after Easter. Then you go back into ordinary time until Advent, which leads up to Christmas. And so as Mindy pointed out, the majority of the year is ordinary time. It's Christmas and Easter that are the big things, Advent and Lent leading up to those two holidays. There are several Christian denominations outside of Catholicism that also follow that same liturgical calendar. And also some Christians just take it upon themselves to follow a liturgical calendar and observe Advent and observe Lent and Ash Wednesday, even if they're not Catholic or even if their church doesn't follow it as a corporate group. So the whole point of the liturgical calendar is basically to provide order to the church. There are those two major events as Christians that you celebrate, the birth of Jesus at Christmas and the death and resurrection of Jesus at Easter. And the calendar provides a way for every church across the world within the same denomination to celebrate in the same way as one big corporate church.
So it's another form of control.
Kind of, but that's a pessimistic way to look at it, Mindy.
Well, I'm a pessimistic person. No, I'm just kidding.
It provides order in a chaotic world.
No, I do like the way you presented that.
I will say too, and I think that Catholics would see it as ritual and tradition.
Yeah,
Oh,
definitely,
for sure.
definitely.
Yes.
I'm not trying to make it sound like a negative thing, but like to me, like as you're saying it,
Sounds like they're controlling us.
well, I'm trying to like connect it to what's going on this island.
100%.
Yeah.
Yes. 1000%. So there are specific prayers, specific passages to be read from scripture, specific specific songs that you sing and rituals, like you're saying, to do like Ash Wednesday service where you put the ashes on your forehead to start the Lenten season. Those ashes represent death and repentance, which is the attitude that Christians are meant to have leading up to Easter, as they basically focus on the sacrifice of Christ. Like that's the whole point, is to focus on repentance and the sacrifice that Jesus made for you.
Do you think that the people of the cloth in the church, once Easter's over, they're like, oh dear God, things have loosened up a little bit. I don't have to do all of these things in the liturgical calendar.
I'm sure sometimes they feel that way, but I bet they probably really love the order of it.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that brings me to the sacrament of communion. So in the first episode of Midnight Mass, we see Riley's dad tell him, you have to come to church, but do not take communion because that is disrespectful, because he's not a believer, right? And he hasn't gone to confession.
I'm sorry, I keep interrupting you, but I'm not that sorry because I do it every week. But
I'm just happy it's happening to someone besides me.
So I never knew that was a thing because I went to a very, very, very conservative church when I was little, and then went with a friend to a Catholic church in middle school. Mm-hmm. And the conservative church that I went to, everybody took communion, like no matter what, mm-hmm. because it was disrespectful not to. So I was really shocked as a middle schooler to go in, and I took communion in the Catholic church and got called out.
I bet you did.
Oh, because they were like, it's very obvious you're not Catholic. What are you doing? And I'm like, I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. Like,
most churches that I have been to, I've never taken communion in a Catholic church because I'm not Catholic, right? But even other denominations, communion is always like, if you are a believer, take communion, and if you're not, please don't, kind of thing.
But I was a believer. That was the thing. And that's why I was like, wait a second.
And see, if you don't have any interaction with any Catholic people growing up, like, why would you know that? You know what I mean? Like, it's not really explicitly said in the service, right? Like, if you go to a different church denomination, they'll say, if you're not a believer, like, please refrain from taking communion. Right. But the Catholic Mass doesn't include that because that's not in their script. It's not in their liturgy, right? Exactly. So they don't say that. So it's confusing.
The Catholic Church, as opposed, and this is, again, I'm just playing devil's advocate. I think from me growing up in the church and just a Protestant church, they're very focused on evangelism, and mm-hmm. Catholics really aren't. They're more focused on order and tradition mm-hmm. and ritual and the
individual.
So it wouldn't come naturally to evangelize about that.
I would agree with that.
I definitely can see how
that's a good way to
put it.
Yeah,
no, that's a very good point. That's very accurate. So we see Riley's dad tell him don't take communion, right? And then when he's actually at church, we see Riley's mom essentially pressure him to come get the ashes on Ash Wednesday, right? And she specifically says, it's not a sacrament, it's just a blessing. And he's like, all right. And he goes up and does it, right? So here's where all of that is coming from. So in Catholicism, this part of the worship is called the sacrament of the Holy Eucharist. And in other denominations, it's just referred to as communion or the Lord's Supper. Eucharist comes from the Greek word for thanksgiving, and participating in this Eucharist or communion is essentially acknowledging and remembering Jesus' Last Supper with his disciples that's talked about in the New Testament Gospels. In the New Testament, you see Jesus give his disciples bread and wine at a Passover dinner and tell them the bread is his body and the wine is his blood, and to eat and drink them in remembrance of him. This happens right before he's arrested and ultimately crucified. So taking communion or the Eucharist is remembering like Jesus told them to, and keeping your focus on his sacrifice on the cross, which is the whole foundation of Christian belief, right? So in Catholicism, the Eucharist is pretty different from other denominations. So in my experience, and probably you guys as well in Protestant churches, the communion or Eucharist is basically a metaphor, and it is symbolic to remember Christ's death, but it is very much presented as a metaphor. Eat your cracker, drink your juice. The cracker is for the bread, the juice is for the wine, right? It is very clearly a metaphor and symbolic. We see Father Paul talk about the idea of metaphors in episode 3 before he passes out. Before he passes out at the altar. In Catholicism, the Eucharist is not metaphorical. There's a theology called transubstantiation, where essentially they believe the wafer and the wine that you are given during the Eucharist literally transformed after it has been blessed by the priest and given to you by the priest. It literally changes inside your body, and the wafer becomes the flesh of Jesus Christ, and the wine becomes the blood of Jesus Christ through like a supernatural grace.
Is that because because the priest blesses it. So like if he doesn't bless it, maybe it doesn't happen that way.
Right.
Okay.
If the priest doesn't bless it, it can't be the sacrament.
Transformed. Okay.
Right. It's not holy.
Right.
That's part of the whole process. So it does have to be blessed. That's why it is a sacrament, right? It is believed to turn into the literal body and the literal blood of Christ. This sacrament is supposed to be like a mystical channel of grace where you receive a spiritual experience through Jesus. It's not just a symbol where you're remembering his death. It's participating in his death and sacrifice, right? So participating in a sacrament like that means you have to be in good standing with God. And to be in good standing with God, you have to go to confession and be absolved of your sins.
So Riley's not gone to confession.
So Riley's dad is like, I know you haven't gone to confession, right? So he hasn't been absolved of his sins. Therefore, he's not in good standing. Therefore, he cannot participate or should not participate in the sacrament.
I'm fairly certain in the prison system, he would have been able to go to confession if he wanted to.
He would have been
for
able.
The record.
He would have been, sure.
His dad does not know that he did not go to confession. You know what I mean?
I think
his dad hates him for what he did in this moment.
I think his dad is making a pretty safe assumption, knowing that Riley is like not into this anymore.
Right.
But I also think he's sending him a message as well.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. So if you have not gone to confession, you should not be participating in the sacrament, according to Catholic beliefs, right? We see that, I mean, obviously with Riley, but also with the entire island, right? We see people being looked at differently because they don't come to church. They don't participate in the sacrament. Like they're not good like the other people, especially in the last episode. We see that play out of like who is in and who is out. And we'll talk more about that in a couple of weeks. So St. Patrick's is basically the pillar of this Crockett Island. Everybody except a handful of people go to church, right? If you don't go, especially after Lisa's miraculous healing, like what's wrong with you, right? Like that's the attitude that everybody seems to have. Why wouldn't you want to participate in this amazing thing that they all get to do? And we'll, talk more about that later, but I mean, Father Paul's manipulating the entire congregation with this whole idea of the sacrament of the Eucharist to have the outcome that he thinks that they need to have, like taking this idea of literal flesh and literal blood and manipulating it from what the Catholic theology actually is and just using it for what he thinks should be the right thing, which it's a vampire, dude. It's not an angel, right? Like it's a vampire. My gosh. I just wanted to talk about this technical kind of religious jargon because it's really foundational for the entire story because it's very foundational to the characters themselves, right? So that is Catholicism in a nutshell, I guess. Crockett Island.
Communion
and the
101.
Sacrament. Communion 101, yeah.
It is very big, a big deal. The whole, obviously blood runs through the whole series. Yeah, I mean, it's just such a integral part of everything. It permeates a lot of the storylines.
So there's that. Should we talk about our favorite moments?
Let's bring this up a notch. I will go first. This is kind of an odd, I guess, moment, but I will say this. As I'm watching this, it's a little difficult to find like favorite moments because it's all very, very dark.
It's heavy, yeah.
And I'm hesitant to say that I like a dark moment, and so I didn't this time, but I probably will eventually.
I don't know. Last week you liked the mean girl's heart getting ripped out.
That is true.
So.
That is true. Well, maybe I felt a little bit bad about that, but what I really loved was that end montage, and I think it was after the third episode. They're kind of running together for me, but it's the end montage when Holly Holy by Neil Diamond is being played because Ed turns it on to dance with Annie. They're dancing because he feels good.
His back doesn't hurt.
His back doesn't hurt anymore. And then during that same montage, Riley goes to visit Erin on her porch and they're just kind of like chilling and talking. I think he brings her a drink or something too. And then also you see Lisa and Warren sneak out and they're kissing on the boat. So it's all these like sweet moments. And I love that, even though like there's this sense of foreboding because it's kind of ominous because it's not going to last.
Yeah.
So
it's like the calm before the storm.
Yeah, but I loved all those sweet little moments, and I actually really love that song. Hot take, I like Neil Diamond. I always have. I just like him. But just that was kind of my favorite moment there.
It was
several
nice.
little moments.
Yeah, it was nice. Well, my favorite, it's not that nice. I picked my favorite moments based on like the writing because I think the writing is just so good in the show.
Amazing.
My favorite moment was Lisa and Joe having that like confrontation where she basically calls him out of, he got drunk and shot his gun and it shot her and paralyzed her.
And he was like hillbilly shooting off in the woods, shooting at nothing and hit someone. Yeah.
Being very unsafe and, not paying attention. And it's like everybody knows that he did it and nobody just like ever talks about it. And her family, there's only 127 people that live on this island. So they see each other all the time. And they're both obviously very traumatized by it. But nobody ever talks about it. And so finally she goes and has this confrontation with him. And I just thought the writing was so well done. I really loved that scene.
His acting in that scene was phenomenal.
Oh, he is so good.
Like the guilt and how much trouble, like it's ruined his life too.
Oh, for sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And you can really see that in his face as she's talking to him. And there's I'm not sure what else the girl Lisa has been in, but she was really good too.
She was really good. Yeah. I feel like everybody did a really good job in this show. It was just very well cast, but them in particular in that confrontation I thought was really, really well done and really good. So that was my favorite moment.
It shows the power of communication too. And just like in that moment, you see both of them see the other side, even though I think both of them sort of understood a little bit where the other one was coming. Maybe not so much where Lisa's concerned, because she definitely got the short end of the stick on that one. But, then in that moment, you can see them understand that other person so much better.
Yeah. Well,
brilliant writing.
Joe knows that everybody hates him, but like nobody hates Joe more than Joe hates Joe.
Exactly.
And she gives him, I feel like, a little bit of like, you're not the worst person in the world. Like, I understand that this was a really horrible accident, a really horrible mistake.
I think she even says, if I can forgive you, you can forgive you.
Yeah. I loved that. That was really good. What about you, Deb?
Speaking of favorite actors, I had like one really tiny favorite moment and then like an actual one. But when my iZombie heartthrob shows up, which is Rahul Kohli,
I love him.
Who plays the sheriff. First of all, he is a fine looking man.
He is.
And he is so funny on iZombie. And so when he came on, I was like, oh my gosh, it's my guy. Because he's been in shows like this, but I don't think he is a super famous actor.
No.
Right?
No, I don't think so.
And I think more people need to know about him.
He should be. Yeah, he's great.
I'll get to it later because he's actually my chapter MVP, but that is part of it.
Can't wait. Yeah, he's really good. Just is really, really awesome. So I was super excited. I did not know he was in the show until he showed up on the screen. But my actual favorite moment was the moment of compassion when the father takes communion to the woman with dementia or Alzheimer's disease.
Yeah,
I love that.
The doctor's mom.
The comfort of faith can just be really impactful to a person, and communion is especially important in Catholicism. I mean, you just touched on that, Whit. So speaking of Catholicism, I do want to speak briefly about the use of the name St. Patrick in the show, because it's actually pretty brilliant. And I'm warning you, some of these stories about St. Patrick are kind of bonkers, just like the show, but it all ties back in together. For those of you who may not be familiar with Catholicism, St. Patrick is the patron saint of Ireland, who converted its inhabitants to Christianity. He's also the person that supposedly drove all of the snakes off the island, and the fellow that we wear green for every March on St. Patrick's Day. And if you're in the U.S., the people in the North celebrate St. Patrick's Day, kind of like the people in the South celebrate Mardi Gras, if that tells you anything. And it gets a little wild, like in Chicago and stuff.
It's not a religious observance.
It is not. It is a time to party. So there are some really wild stories about this patron saint of Ireland, and the lore of this show relies actually pretty heavily on these tales. So the most notable story that most of us know of St. Patrick is that he drove the snakes from Ireland. If you think about the symbolism of snakes, they're bottom feeders, they crawl on their belly, and they represent the original sin in the Bible. And Midnight Mass takes place on an island where they're trying to purge sin. Mm-hmm. So I found that correlation super duper cool. Some claim that St. Patrick could raise people from the dead to testify about Christianity.
Ooh.
And we know in this show the island inhabitants must die so they can be resurrected to do God's work. Number 3, St. Patrick believed in a full pour, and I'm talking about alcohol. So we know this show deals heavily with the alcoholism, and according to legend, St. Patrick ordered whiskey at a pub and was offended that the bartender did not fill his glass fully, which I'm thinking to myself, you don't need a full rock glass of whiskey, bro. That's a lot of alcohol. So St. Patrick claimed that the bartender had a devil in his cellar feeding on his dishonesty, so he told him he best get his act together. So, of course, according to legend, the bartender immediately changed his ways and then always poured drinks all the way to the rim thereafter.
I feel like you didn't give me enough booze, so
Right.
you've got a demon downstairs.
What? You're being dishonest with me, damn you. Right? So St. Patrick was actually brought to, okay, so this is number 4. St. Patrick was actually brought to Ireland as a slave at the age of 16, which I did not know.
I didn't know that either.
He escaped, but later in his life heard the voice of God telling him to return and convert the island, much like Father Paul in Midnight Mass does.
Wow.
And finally, this is a huge spoiler for the end of the show, but during St. Patrick's, he's known for fasting upon a mountain, kind of like Moses did. So during this time, he was harassed by demon birds. And St. Patrick ended his fast when God gave him the right to judge all the Irish people at the Last Judgment and agreed to spare the land of Ireland from the final desolation, which essentially is the end of the world in the book of Revelations in the Bible. And in the show, we see the world is in fact saved from the demon bird, right? When all the shelters and boats are burned, effectively stopping the new vampires from infecting the rest of the world. So they don't go into desolation, which I found really cool. So
That is really cool.
Yeah, I love that they use St. Patrick. And again, I'm not making fun of any of the stories about St. Patrick, but I mean, there are websites that are like, listen to all these like lore stories about him. Right. And he is a patron saint. And so I don't know. I just thought that was a cool correlation.
That is really cool.
Yeah, it seems like almost everything he does correlates. I mean, that's definitely not on accident, right?
Well, no. Yeah.
I don't feel like anything in the show was
No,
on
I don't
accident.
either.
Mike Flanagan is the guy who wrote and directed all of this, and he's just, I think he's just genius for this show. I've never watched anything else he's done. He's done a ton of stuff on Netflix.
He does Haunting of Hill House and Haunting of Bly Manor. And
Yeah.
Haunting of Bly Manor is okay, but Haunting of Hill House, that will scare the shit out of you. Like, it is super scary. And it's not like this where there's like this has a lot more social commentary than his other stuff does.
The other
very
ones
layered.
just scare you shitless.
Right.
See, I'm not into that. I'm into the layers.
I mean, you put some Catholicism in there, though, and Whitney will watch it all over
Right.
it.
Give me some religious undertones, and I'm all about it.
Well, Whitney, what was your least favorite spot?
My least favorite moment in these first 3 episodes is when Joe's dog dies at the potluck. It's just really sad, which again, great acting, right? Great acting by everybody in the crowd as well. And Bev, that super nuanced, like, oh no, look what happened by accident. You know,
Your poor dog. I
Yeah.
feel awful for
oh
it.
gosh, if he accidentally ate some of that,
I would just feel awful.
I would just feel terrible. Is that what you're saying, Sheriff? I'm like, I hate you. But it was
what
perfect.
You're saying, Sheriff.
Yes, exactly.
It was. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
And then Erin's that great, you know, she looks over at Bev and is like putting 2 and 2 together because she had seen Bev using the poison for rats or whatever. And that whole scene I thought was just really sad. I have a dog now, so I get it more.
I don't have
Before
a dog,
I
but
would have been like,
did
all
think
right.
I did think it was really sad that, and I was sad for Joe.
Yeah.
Because it's
know.
really the only thing that Joe had.
It was his only friend. Yeah.
Yeah.
The only being on the island besides Bowl that treats him like a person and not like, you know, a
I'm
social
not sure
pariah.
Bull treats him like a person either, though.
He treats
More
him
than the
as-
other people.
Yeah,
you
that's
know,
true.
He's a
he at least comes
source
and helps
of-
him
Oh,
out.
that's true. That is
Yeah.
true.
But
What about you, Deb?
My least favorite moment wasn't only because it was uncomfortable, but because it's so relevant to actual real life and just really tough to digest. For me, it was hearing about Riley's battle with his inner demons of alcoholism.
yeah.
Riley explains to Aaron that he has a second person inside of him that he has to coexist with. And he says, quote, "Then I woke up one morning and found out that he, the inner demon, had killed someone. I had killed someone," unquote. And then he talks about options for recovery. And I actually had no idea that AA was a faith-based program that actually calls onto a higher power of healing. And Riley touches on this on the show, but the creator of AA gave it 12 steps to correlate with there being 12 apostles in the Christian faith.
Yeah.
And I'm not condoning AA for using faith as a tenet because it can be very impactful for people, but that could easily single out someone who really needs an accountability program for recovery, right?
Yeah.
So if you know someone who might be uncomfortable with speaking about faith, there are other programs, and there's a program referenced in the show called Rational Recovery, or RR. And according to alcoholrehab.org, Rational Recovery is an addiction recovery program developed by Jack Trimpey, who was an alcoholic. Its goal is to help people overcome alcoholism, but unlike AA, it doesn't call for a higher power. RR is a self-help program that promotes abstinence through self-autonomy. Now, unfortunately, the RR website is parked and doesn't have any information on it. So someone still owns the domain, but it's parked. But there is a program that seems to be based off of RR called SMART, which stands for Self-Management and Recovery Training. And according to alcoholabuse.com, SMART recovery differs from AA or NA because it has a scientific foundation and not a spiritual one, just like RR does. And unlike AA or NA, SMART recovery teaches increasing self-reliance rather than powerlessness, because AA kind of teaches like you're powerless to alcohol, and SMART focuses more on like you can do this, right? In addition, SMART recovery meetings are environments where members talk with one another rather than to one another, if that makes sense. So I wanted to link both of these options in the show notes, and I'm not saying one is better than the other, but because this show deals so heavily with alcoholism, I just really wanted people to understand that there are different types of recovery systems. And I mean, if you want the faith-based one or you want the one not, like, you should do the one that works the best for you. And that's kind of Riley's point in this moment. And that was really poignant for me, just to hear him talk about the inner demon part of this, because a lot of people don't understand that addiction is a literal disease.
Well, and like you say, AA has been super helpful for a lot of people, but it's not going to work for everybody. So the more options there are, the better, right?
And not every diet works for everybody.
Right.
But if you think about the different religions, even there's a couple of different religions on this island, right? So if you're using say the sheriff was an alcoholic, but he's Buddhist, he isn't going to want to go talk to Father Paul about his recovery. So I think it's important that the creator of this show pointed out that there's different recovery programs. So my least favorite thing, but also one of the things that I really liked about the show.
What about you, Min?
Well,
Ditto.
I had a couple. One is just in general, just Bev, like, because she's a pompous, self-righteous bitch and a racist. Her speech about religion in schools kind of made my blood boil. Like, her double standard about it was just...
Well, I would never tell them anything that would just directly correlate to the Bible.
Right. I hate Bev, but I also really love Bev because I feel like her character is the most genius. The most genius writing on the whole show.
She knows how to find the loophole. She knows
so
how to
good at manipulating.
word salad things.
Yes.
That type of person is, though. Like,
right.
Throughout this whole series, she uses, and people do this, unfortunately, to use religion against people, but she uses scripture from the Bible against people. I mean, like, almost every sentence out of her mouth. And like, when you get towards the end of the show, you're like, this bitch is fucking crazy.
It's either to like put people down or to bolster herself up.
Every time.
Right. But it's always taken out of context and has nothing to do with what is actually happening.
Which is part of the reason why I love this show so much, because as somebody, you know, my dad was a pastor. I've been at church since before I was born, right? I know these people, right? Like, I know those people that know the Bible, but misuse it.
These are the people that make people stop believing.
Yeah, they're the most dangerous ones.
Whatever God they believe in.
Right. The deconstruction movement in Christianity is because of Bev.
Good job. So hate you, Bev.
That was my general least favorite person, moment, twist, whatever. But my second one was the animals dying.
I know,
so the dog dies, and then why the kitties?
Oh my
why
gosh,
do all of them have
cats.
to die? Like, I mean, I'm a super crazy cat woman, but I was just like, oh, boo, leave the animals alone.
I was relieved when they didn't show them up close, to be honest. I was like, please don't do it.
Yeah.
When they wash up.
I just have a super attachment to animals in general, and just cats too. So speaking of that, and all the cats on the uppers in Midnight Mass that end up dying on the beach, I kind of looked into that, and did you know that there are whole islands in Japan called cat islands?
No, it sounds like your dream place.
It does, doesn't it?
It's your next vacation.
Where are you going? Oh, I'm going to Cat Island.
I definitely want to hit 1 or 2 or 11 of them. And they're called Nekoshima. And there are 11 small islands, 11 islands of these cats, where there are fewer than 500 humans, and where the cats dominate the human population, sometimes as much as 8 to 1.
I love
Oh dear God.
the image that pops into my head when you're like, the cats dominate the humans.
I picture them up on like 2 feet like a human does, like cooking.
Sitting on a throne.
All I can think about is I'm allergic to cats and how miserable I would be.
that would be
inside.
terrible.
Well, when I see you say dominate, of course, I go to BDSM and whipping people.
Now I've got a cat on 2 feet, but it's got like a leather like holster on. It's got
With
like
a whip in its hand.
cat of 9 tails in its hand.
Talk about
gosh.
monster
I did
smut.
not go there. But yes, as I was doing this, I was like, this is Deb's worst nightmare.
Yes,
It really
not because
is.
I don't like cats,
I know,
but because I would be miserable
You
the whole
would be.
time.
So it's important to note here that cats are actually not native to Japan at all. So they came from northern Africa and they evolved from the African wildcat, which was later brought around the world to help keep the rat population down and away from their food. So
Thank you, cats.
Right? So this is like plague times when rats are abundant and whatnot. So humans intentionally bred and freed these cats on these islands solely to diminish rat populations. So in general,
But now they have a cat
And then
population problem.
it got away from them.
it did actually. In general, though, the Japanese culture reveres cats because they see them as symbols of protection and good luck, and it comes
Oh
from
yeah,
that.
I forgot. Like Egyptian cultures, don't they revere cats as well?
So, okay, listen. I just watched The Mummy this week from like
that's right.
1999,
You posted about
and
that.
there was a part where Brendan Fraser brings in a white cat, and it scares the mummy away. And I was like, "What? Like, what is happening here?"
Whitney, where's your deep dive?
I know, right?
Well, I do remember too. You see a lot of times in different Asian cultures, the little cat with his hand paw up, like there's a little statue. They revere these cats.
Okay.
The most famous of these cat islands is called Tashirojima, and here the cats have a sort of symbiotic relationship with the fishermen. So the cats keep the rats away, and the fishermen and citizens of the island give them scraps of fish and sometimes a warm place to sleep at night. So they're like,
Well, that's nice.
they keep each other.
You scratch my back,
Yes,
I'll scratch yours.
Exactly. So releasing this dense amount of cats on such a small island did create a hotbed for breeding and reproduction
I
because
bet it
cats
did.
do that.
What kind of hotbed?
This is where it gets sexy. No. But it's interesting to note that the island actually has a strict no dog policy. Like you cannot bring dogs on this island, and it prevents any cat predators from coming on the island and giving the cats. They have free range of the island. Like they run the island.
That's really interesting. Do you know? So there are 11 of these islands. Are they like spread out along the coast, or are they like grouped together? Do you know?
I don't actually know that. I think they're kind of spread out. Yeah,
That's
I mean
really
they're definitely
interesting.
very isolated.
Okay, so I do like our nerdiest sketchbook, and all I want to draw right now is Mindy with her top knot, cross stitching, sitting in a park on Cat Island with like 20
Oh my
cats
gosh,
laying
please.
around her.
Can one of
Please
them be
do
a
that.
dominatrix?
Do you want them holding a whip?
Yes.
Okay, you got
Absolutely.
it. You got it. The whole
be great.
cartoon's going to be really sweet, and then there's just if you look
dominatrix
far back, there's a cat
dom
glaring
cat.
at you with the whip in its hand.
This is brilliant, and I can't wait. So reports from this island say that there are at least 150 cats on the island, but possibly up to 800. So they're not even like cataloged. Like, it could be 150 or 800.
150 to 800 is a big range.
And the human population is actually dwindling because the island's very vulnerable to weather events like the 2011 earthquake that resulted in the tsunami. It devastated the coast of Tashirojima and it forced many of the inhabitants to flee to the mainland. But the cat population still thrives because of tourism and interest. Visitors coming to see the crazy cat island and offer treats and attentions to the
say
cats.
you want to go there,
Right.
It definitely, like, that is what people do. They go and see. That's literally all they do on the island is they go and they feed the cats. So locals will also take special care of the cats, and a vet will even come to the island every couple of months so that the cats don't suffer from disease, illness, malnutrition, whatever.
That's nice.
So yeah,
That's real cool of them.
That's nice of them. Yeah.
So can I ask, like, are you supposed to assume that the angel ate all of them and then
Yes.
he
Yes.
threw
He
them
drank
into
their
the water
blood.
and they washed up, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
because they talk about when they're on the island getting high that things will like wash up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes, and so I was like, damn, he was hungry.
He was on the island when
Right,
the kids were on
right,
the island.
yeah. Right.
Yeah.
because
So
one of
let-
them saw him, right? One of them saw the eyeballs.
the eyes. But yeah, like that's what I don't understand. If you've got like a big piece of like dude meat right there. I'm surprised he didn't eat the kids.
That is true. Why didn't he?
I think that he understood the Father Paul's plan to like change and turn everybody.
So it was an enlightened demon.
So I do want to say
I think it was patient.
Yeah.
That does go into my biggest revelation.
I'm done, yeah.
Are you done? Okay, sorry, I didn't want to cut you off. Because I thought at the beginning of the show that the father was the angel, right? That it was the same person. So I really was shocked to learn that he actually brought the angel back with him. So I don't know if I was like dense and not paying attention or what. But here's what I'm a little fuzzy on. I don't understand how he gets the level of power that he has from the angel that no one else receives, right? Like him being able to tell when a miracle is going to happen and all those things. And I also don't understand how he communicates with the angel, because you never hear like the angel speak or anything, right? And so is it supposed to be telepathically?
I think it's telepathically, but I think it's because, especially in these first few episodes, Father Paul has way more of the angel blood in him than anybody else does.
And he also was killed and then came back to life. Like,
well, that goes into another question for me, though, because Father Paul doesn't have the negative effects for vampirism for quite some time. Like, he can still go out into the sun and stuff.
I had the same question.
So how come Riley, his is so advanced?
I think that in the cave, I don't think he actually died.
In the cave.
In the cave.
Okay.
And Riley did.
And Riley
so
did.
He changed
So
altogether.
Father Paul doesn't start to have those signs until, remember, he dies on the floor of his
Right.
house in front of
Right.
Bev and the mayor and stuff. And then after that is when he starts to have
that makes
the
much
signs.
more sense, because I was like, I felt like Riley rapidly, like,
Yeah.
quote unquote,
I had the
declined.
exact
Yeah.
same question.
Yeah,
So-
it's because he actually died and then came back.
Okay, so yeah, the father, you're right. The father doesn't start having like almost like sun sickness and shit until after he dies. But that's my other question: is he dies just like the dog does?
Who? Which one? Who? are we
Father
talking-
Paul does.
He dies. Yeah, like he's got
like
frothy
foams at
mouth.
the mouth.
Yeah.
Like, are you supposed to assume that Bev poisoned him so to see if he would come back?
I have never thought about that, actually. That's a really interesting point.
Because it happens within like a couple of days of each other, and like he literally dies just like the dog does.
And she must just be a good actress then, because she really did. Like, at least
That's a good question.
in
I
that
don't know.
in the realm of that, I feel like it would have shown a little bit of her being sneaky.
But
'cause
I don't quite understand what he died
Why
from.
did he
Yeah, I
Why
don't
he
know
died.
that
Like, why
either.
did he start having nosebleeds? Like, why did all this? Was the angel, like, was it too much angel blood and it like killed him?
That's kind of what
I'm saying
I
angel,
would-
but I mean demon.
Well,
Yeah.
sure. I think that he probably had too much of the angel blood in him and not to remain human. And I think it probably,
killed him.
yeah, I think that is what makes the most sense
ask
to me.
the guy though why it was so similar to the way that the dog died.
That is a good question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then later, how everybody else dies too.
Right.
Spoiler
Yeah.
alert.
Because
Yeah.
they do drink the poison.
Yeah.
Right. But yeah, they died just like Father Paul does.
That's interesting.
Or if do we not know that the angel told him to drink that? Maybe.
Maybe. I don't know. It doesn't tell us.
maybe he just gave up and took some himself and was like, I can't do this anymore.
I don't know. Maybe.
That doesn't seem in character, though.
I literally had not ever thought about it that deeply to be like, wait, why did he die? I guess I just assumed it was the angel blood
Right.
that
Well,
killed
in your
him.
defense, I don't think you watched it like back to back to back like I did. Like I literally, that's my nerdiest thing of the week, by the way, is that I went to go
Binge
watch
watch.
3 episodes and I watched 7.
They're good.
They
They
are.
are good.
And
And
there's
they
only
leave-
7.
Well, and they leave you hanging at the end of
Right.
every one.
I know, right?
And I mean, when we prep for the podcast, generally, I don't like to know what's going to happen because it messes with my questions, right?
Right.
So I wrote down questions and didn't change them. But yeah, I think it was because I was watching it at such a fast pace.
Yeah. So which part of that was actually the biggest revelation?
That he was not also the angel. I thought it was the
Oh,
same
okay.
person. And
Gotcha.
so whenever you get, I think it's either the end of episode 2 or 3, and like you actually see what happens in the cave.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, those are 2 different people.
Yeah.
I thought it was the same person. I don't know
Okay,
why
gotcha.
I thought that, but I did.
Well, they leave it pretty ambiguous because
Yeah.
you're like, something's up with this dude, but like, what
Right.
is it?
Yeah.
Like I knew he wasn't like innocent who he said he was, right? Yeah.
Because you kind of, I know the first time I watched it, the first couple of episodes, I was like, did he kill the priest to take his spot
Right.
You know, did he kill the
That's
old
where
man?
I
Like,
went.
yeah, that would have made a lot of sense. But
Well, and I
know.
think that's what I thought. I thought that the vampire, like that he was dead and this person had taken his place, but he was also the vampire.
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
yeah, which becomes true. Like episode 4 or 5.
Essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was your biggest revelation, Mindy?
Similarly, but kind of going on, I kind of thought that this, Father Paul went and he was in the Holy Land with Monsignor Pruitt and saw an opportunity to make this guy keel over and take over. And like he already knew about, like I always thought he already knew about whatever he was going to do. And I knew there was obviously something supernatural or something else going on there.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's kind of obvious, I guess, as the revelations go, but it's just when we find out then that Paul Hill is actually the same person as John Pruitt, but he's like de-aged or reverse aged or
Benjamin
whatever.
Buttoned.
Yes.
Yeah, I will say one thing I did not like about this show overall is that when like the blood heals you, you're at your peak only when you're young.
Yeah.
That bothered me just a little
Physical.
bit because I'm like, physically, yes, but
Yeah.
like if you think about like mentally and being able to like handle things and like be in the real world, you're not at your
Yeah.
peak when you're 22.
Well, but the whole thing, and this is getting into the final episode, and so we'll talk more about it in a couple of weeks, but the whole thing is the obsession with like not dying. Right. And it's not about your mental or emotional or spiritual health. It's just your physical life. Right. Like staying alive.
Did you tell us what your biggest revelation was?
No, my biggest revelation is basically the same as your all's, that Father Paul is Monsignor Pruitt, that they are the same person and that he's like Benjamin Buttoned. Yeah. But also, I guess my biggest revelation in conjunction with that is the fact that he just goes straight to, oh, this is an angel. That is so crazy to me that like,
but if you think about the more you learn about John Pruitt and how devout he was,
yeah,
I think to him, I think his thinking is there's no way God would have sent me to that cave to meet a demon.
Sure. But it's just so funny to me. I know this is the second time I've watched the show, and the first time I watched it, it was like every stereotype about a vampire, this thing ticks, right? Like it checks all the boxes. And it is just so crazy to me that it's like, clearly this is the angel of the Lord. Like
Pruitt,
what?
If he only lived on that island, maybe he didn't know very much about vampires.
That's true too.
Not
yeah.
only that, you got to think about the state that the island was in, how it was
true. Yeah.
Basically going to ruins, and all he wants to do is save his congregation and make sure that they have what they need. So when you think about too, a lot of people come to religion when they're in their lowest points because they're looking for something that will help them or save them.
Yeah,
and
that's true.
So in that mindset, I can see where plus he was senile. So, there's that.
I know, right? It's like what you were just talking about. His senile brain did not get
I felt so when they talk about that at the end of episode 3, when they show like him going into the sandstorm and going into the cave, like it was heartbreaking. Again, we talked about how great the actors are in this show, but the actor that plays him, and I don't know if it's the young guy actor in makeup or not.
No, I think it's two different.
I think it's two different. I tried to look that up and I couldn't find any.
Because in some of these
either
instances,
way.
it is like the woman with Alzheimer's, like that's the same
for sure.
actress. But I just watching his mental decline was really sad.
Yeah.
Really sad.
That scene with the cave is actually my favorite scary scene in the first 3 episodes.
What do you like about it?
I like the fact that this show is scary in an intense way and not in like a jump scare kind of way. Like there are a couple of times where I feel like they're the jump scares when people see the angels like glowing eyes out of the windows or whatever, like when the kids were on the uppers with the cats or whatever. But those are very few and far between. And I just don't like those kinds of scares. But the intense like thriller mystery type of like what is going on, trying to figure this out, everything feels very ominous and foreboding, and the music gives you that sense of tension the whole time. I just thought the cave scene did a very good job with that, of like, what is going on? And then you see this creature and it's so scary because we've talked before.
Beautiful the way that they directed it when his wings open and the episode ends. It's super impactful.
We've talked before about how sometimes your imagination is scarier and then you see the thing and you're like, oh. But I don't feel like that in this show. I feel like they did a really good job making it scary looking, but not crazy over the top. Like, okay, you guys really went out with CGI on this or something,
right?
You know?
Because it's a humanoid figure.
Yes.
And that almost makes it worse.
I know, right?
Yeah.
I loved that scene.
Reminded me of when Castiel reveals himself in Supernatural, where the wings, but it's a shadow, but it comes out. Just that beauty of that.
Yeah.
You said Castiel, but you mean Castiel, right?
I'm sorry. Yes, I do.
I was
God.
like, wait, from Blood
You're
now
like,
she
wait,
had
what?
wings?
I mean Castiel. You're like, wait, what?
Our favorite angel on our shoulder. What's yours, Mindy? What was your favorite scary moment?
Well, actually, it's the parts for me are the times when the characters hear something or see something, but nothing happens.
The bumps in the night.
That tension. So like when Erin hears the thud on her roof, or when Sheriff Hassan sees something out the window and they're startled. Those are the creepy moments that are just like, what is going to happen and when? Keeps me on the edge of my seat. Is exactly what you were saying. And my sanity. I'm like, okay,
Right.
What's going on here?
Well, because in other scary movies, you know, you would hear... Erin would hear the bump up on her roof, and she would go upstairs and be like, "What's that?" And then she'd
killed.
yes, and
Or
then she'd
she would
immediately
walk
get
out
killed.
in a white
Right.
T-shirt with no bra, and like the moonlight would be on her
And trip on something.
Right.
Like the scene in Scary Movie, the spoof where Carmen Electra's
yeah.
running out and her clothes are falling off and like in the sprinkler.
So
Yeah.
for me, and we've already talked about this, so the creator of Midnight Mass also developed the shows The Haunting of Hill House and The Haunting of Bly Manor. And I just want to point out, because we talk about books on this podcast all the time, that The Haunting of Hill House is actually based off a book written by Shirley Jackson and has been hailed as a perfect work of unnerving terror, according to nationalbook.org. Did you guys
Nice.
know that?
I did not know that.
So anyway, all three shows deal with creepy ass specters, and it's no different for Riley and the girl that he kills in his drunk driving accident.
yeah.
The hair on the back of my arm stood to full attention when Riley asks his ghost how her day was.
Ugh, I know.
I know.
And I had awful dreams
Chill.
about it.
That's
I'm sorry.
chilling.
Because
Chilling.
I think at this point, she is the only thing kind of tethering him to the world right now. And like it, and him asking her how her day was is just heartbreaking, but scary as fuck.
Yeah, and it's every time he lays down.
Yeah.
Every time.
Every single time he lays down to go to bed, you see the lights shining in his
Right. So that's
in
the
his
thing,
face.
though, with the creator of this show. There's something like that in all three of the shows. And it's usually it's typically the scariest part
Yeah.
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
the show.
He's
Yeah.
just a horror genius,
He is.
in my humble opinion.
Now, who did you say your chapter MVP was earlier?
Oh, it's Riley.
Oh, okay.
It's Riley
Who
for
It
said-
was
sure.
me.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I love Riley. I love him. I think his character development is so good. He's obviously, the opening scene of the show is him having killed this girl in a drunk driving accident, right? So but it's like you think that you should hate him because of that, but the way that the island treats Joe, right? Like you did this horrible thing just because you were being dumb. Like how could you do that? But Riley is so endearing to me, and I feel so badly for him as opposed to just feeling judgmental toward him.
You
for,
feel like he has tried to repent for what he's done, and he knows how what he's done is horrible, right?
He
took
has a lot
someone's
of
life.
he has remorse, right? It's not just like, oh well, sucks to suck. Like he really genuinely he genuinely feels bad about it,
Well,
and
it's the
it
same
makes me
thing
feel bad for him.
Where, the only person that hates Riley, nobody hates Riley more than he
Riley.
hates himself.
Yeah, that's true.
So you had said though that yours was the sheriff, and that's mine too. So
Oh,
I want to
really?
hear. I want to
Oh, okay.
hear why yours is
Well,
the sheriff.
I mean, part of it's because he played Ravi in iZombie, and I just adore this actor. But I really do love that his character stands up for what he believes in. He's the only one that's kind to Joe. He dares to question Bev, which, let's be honest, everybody should be doing.
Everybody wants to be doing, but
I
they're too
know.
scared.
He's an outsider, but he often serves as the voice of reason. So he's challenging the way that things have always been done, and it doesn't necessarily mean it's the right way. I think he's just sort of that foil, that great foil that just grounds it in just humanity.
Mine was almost exact verbatim what you just said. Mine was he is the only person with rational behavior on the island.
Yeah.
Right. He's the only one also that can speak about other religions freely and not think that everyone's wrong. Right. And he, in that school scene where he finds out his son brought home a Bible, he is very even keeled and rational and says like, look, I understand the Bible. I think it's a great book, but there's also all of these other works of religion, and in that scene watching his face crumple when Bev like convinces it, because everyone's on his side for a second. They're like, wait, he's right. And then Bev's like, actually, right. But
oh, what did she like?
Actually, but he never like acts like an insane person like everyone else, and plus he's pretty
and he's hot.
I love him. I love him. And I'm seriously though, he is a really good actor. It's not just that he's pretty.
Yeah, he's really, really good. I like his character a lot.
Yeah.
What about favorite secondary characters?
So we were talking last week, Mindy, how like you felt bad about like one of your favorite scenes was someone getting their heart ripped out,
Yes.
right? So I know this is going to sound really sadistic, but my favorite side character is the dumb drug dealer kid Bull.
Yeah.
But only because I enjoyed hearing this dumbass die. I mean, who walks into a dilapidated house where something is speaking back to you in your own voice? Who does that? What a dumb piece of crap. And I also like him because what's the town drunk's name? I hate to call him that.
Joe Colley.
So he actually has my favorite quote about Bull in the first 3 episodes, and he says, "It's not his fault he was born woefully fucking unfunny." And I feel that way about a lot of dudes that act like that kid did, right?
Yeah.
Like, and so I really enjoyed. He was a strain on the community. I mean, he was doing nice things for Joe, to your point,
right?
But he is racist towards the sheriff. I mean, he deals drugs to kids, right? He's not doing anything good for his community, and he dies in like the dumbest way possible. And I loved it so much.
It's that classic horror movie. Like, why would you go investigate that?
So
Stop.
that was the point, because I think I've said this before. Mindy and I had been watching this at a craft retreat together, and everyone went to bed, and I stopped watching, and it was that scene where I was like, I'm scared.
I mean, that is a scary scene.
It is.
Yeah, I was like, he's talking back to himself in his own voice. I don't like it. But again, it's the same thing like you just brought up. Like, Aaron did not go upstairs and go like, what? But he was like, oh, something's talking to me in my own voice. Maybe I should walk into this dark house.
Maybe he was high.
We're going to go ahead and assume that.
Yeah. I think that's a safe assumption.
What about you, Mindy?
Well, this might be surprising, but my favorite secondary character is actually Joe. Like,
He's one of mine too.
I get why he's the town pariah. Like, I get that. But I also see that he's remorseful. He hates himself just as much as the townspeople do. And then to see his growth after he meets with Riley and Father Paul, like that conversation he has with Riley walking home from the AA meeting, it's just so raw and vulnerable. And you really get to kind of like see that inner turmoil. Plus, he was totally done wrong when Bev killed his dog. That was just the worst.
Yeah, that was horrible. Yeah, he was one of my favorite secondary characters too, but also Erin, because she, kind of like what we're talking about, people being nice to Joe, like Erin is really welcoming and accepting of Riley, right? Like she sees his remorse the way that we as the audience do, and she provides a safe place for him when his family's not really a safe place for him, right? Because they're still like, they hurt on his behalf and they're kind of embarrassed and wish that he would be more religious like they are, and they're not safe for him.
She's more objective.
Her family was not a safe place for her
No.
either. You learn, like, between her mom and then her abusive husband, I think she can relate to Riley on a lot of different levels that no one else can.
And they loved each other way back in the day.
I think they still
and they
do.
still do.
Yeah.
I know. What about favorite quotes? Did you guys pick out? I feel like everything is just really well written.
Mine was the woefully fucking unfunny one.
Yeah.
Because it was good comedic relief.
I needed some comedic relief after all the cats dying. And I liked it when Riley said to Aaron, stay away from the cats. I don't want you catching toxocatmosis or whatever. And she says, don't tell me what to do.
Yeah, that was pretty funny. Aaron is funny. I did not pick a funny quote. I know, right?
Just kidding. This show's a little.
It's heavy.
It's a little heavier than what we usually discuss, but it's great.
I have 2 quotes that I just really, really loved. When Mayor, his daughter, is the one that gets healed, and they're talking to the doctor about it, and he said, "It feels wrong to interrogate a miracle." And I love that, and I totally understand. Like, I've been given this, and I'm not going to ask any questions. I'm going to take it. I'm going to run with it, right? As a parent, I get that. And then in that confrontation I talked about earlier with Lisa and Joe, when she says, "You reached through time and you stole my future from me, and like what I could have been."
You're gonna make me cry.
I know. Right? But like, how genius is that line, right? Like, you totally understand what she means by that. Like, it's just good job, Mike Flanagan. I know you're listening, Mike.
Good job, Mike. We appreciate you.
What about any questions you guys have after these first 3 episodes?
I think I've answered all of mine.
In this first little section, I kind of want to know if Father Paul knows that Bev knows his secret.
That was a question I had too. Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah,
it's because she figures it out when he's having trouble, and she sees the picture.
That old newspaper clipping.
I'm just going to go spoiler alert. I assume because in episode 1, whenever like the coffin or whatever's in the living room, and she walks in and he's standing in the doorway, and it cuts away. I think once I got all the way through the show, I assumed that he told her everything because she never questions what he does.
That does make... I know, you're right. That's why I kind of had that question. I was like, but she's also... It's sort of like...
she walks in, though, to, like, Joe dying, and she's like, well, yeah, that's what you do, because this is who you are. Like, she doesn't seem surprised by any of it.
I think at that point, she does... Well, she does, but that's the thing. She realizes there's something up in this moment.
I don't think he tells her. I think she knows that he is... Somehow,
I don't
he
think
is...
Bev's that fucking smart, to be honest.
Well... We'll talk more about it next week.
I think she's that fucking
episodes.
Devout, is what she is.
Yeah, I agree.
She just doesn't. She is so into this, and she knows that he's the perfect, person to lead them or whatever. That she isn't going to believe anything else than whatever he's doing is for the good.
Right.
So she just doesn't question it. And a lot of times that is an issue with people. I mean, not even just in religion, in politics and whatever.
With
people
leaders in
don't
general.
question
But
things.
we talked about a lot, like religious, like the things that people do in the name of religion. And this is one of those things like, well, it's got to be right because he's telling me to do it. And that's how influential people of power end up hurting others.
Right.
Yeah.
What about what you guys are looking forward to?
Actually, I did have one more question.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. What kind of slacker tour company lets an 80-year-old man wander off? And how in the hell did he manage to make it to the middle of nowhere in a hot desert all by himself? Or maybe he just hallucinated that whole part and the vampire ranger attacked him in a porta potty or something. I don't know. I don't understand how he made it all the way through that desert without keeling over. And then that's so irresponsible. I'm never taking a tour in the Holy Land with people that don't know what they're doing.
Yeah. I mean, those are fair questions. Yes. Somebody needs to pay.
I think so.
I think it's Crockett Island that ends up paying for that.
Yeah. I like, though, how no one's called to be like, well, we lost Monsignor.
Right.
We're a little worried about this guy that we can't find.
Right. Yeah. I don't know.
He didn't die in a cave with a vampire. That happens sometimes.
Not only did they lose him, they don't follow up with their mistakes.
Exactly.
I mean, I'm telling you,
who is in charge of him?
This is a shady company.
Based off this show, God will take care of it. It's fine.
Yeah. Isn't that the truth? What are you guys looking forward to after these first 3 episodes?
I hope Bev gets punched in the face.
I said I really want to see Bev get hers.
Yeah, that's what I look forward to as well. I also look forward to Aaron and Riley seem like they know what's up. They're going to figure it all out.
Yeah.
So
also they're going to get together. Maybe
maybe we'll get some sexy time after all. Get a little sexy time. Did you guys have any tidbits? Because I had 2 just random tidbits.
I had one little random tidbit.
Okay, go for it.
I thought it was really cool the detail that Warren doesn't drink. Because of what happened with his brother.
Yeah.
It didn't because I've watched this before and I did not.
Again, because they're not great about giving showing us names over and over again. So
Warren is Riley's brother.
Thank you.
And so when they're on the island, he's smoking pot, but he doesn't want anything to drink. And they're like, oh, he doesn't do that. And then it clicked that it's because of what happened with Riley.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is just a cool detail.
Mm-hmm. So these are 2 random tidbits. But when they do the flashback to Israel and a younger priest comes up to the old Monsignor Pruitt and is like, come here this way, Monsignor Pruitt. That's actually Mike Flanagan, the young priest. Yeah, okay. That's a cameo.
Okay, that's cool.
And also the actor who plays Riley's dad is the kid from E.T.
Yes. He was also in Haunting of Hill House.
Yeah, he works with Mike Flanagan a lot now. So does the sheriff. I can't remember his name. The guy from iZombie.
Oh, yeah.
And also the actress who plays Erin Green is Mike Flanagan's wife.
Really?
Oh, I didn't know
I think she's in Haunting of Hill House.
She's in a lot of his stuff. Yeah. So that's just random. But I was like, hey, that's the kid from E.T.
Okay. So it's funny because I kept thinking he's on like one of those like teen dramas like Dawson's Creek. Nope, it was E.T.
It was E.T., yeah.
Teen
Yeah.
drama, E.T. It's all the same.
It's tomato. So, shall we do our nerdiest thing of the week? Who wants to go first?
Thank goodness you didn't try to skip it.
I know, right? Can you believe? Who wants to go first?
You go first, Whit.
Me? Okay. Well, I have our friend of the pod, Amanda, who just had the baby that she named Penelope.
Shout out to Amanda.
Yeah, Poppy. She was texting me asking for book recommendations, and she had tried Why Choose and was like not super into
It
it.
wasn't Bonds That Tie, was it?
It wasn't.
Okay.
And I said, you need to try the Bonds That Tie because it's really, really good. And she texted, this was yesterday. I think it was yesterday. Maybe it was 2 days ago. But she texted me this morning and she was like, I'm on book 3.
We call that pulling a Whitney.
Yeah, I know, right? She was like, I have to stop so I can go to church.
She's like, I need to pray.
And I was like, I get it. I feel you. Don't worry about it. But she's really, really loving it. So I was like,
Awesome.
yes, one more convert to the Bonds That Tie.
So I already touched on this, but mine was about binging too. It was me trying to just watch 3 episodes of this and being like, well, what's going to happen? Shit, I can keep going. Right. And I never
that's a good
actually
one.
have time to sit down and watch TV. So I kind of took advantage of that time. Too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And mine was also podcast related. Mine was just my deep dive into the Cat Islands. And now I have like an itinerary. It's on my bucket list. Like, I'm so going to Cat Island.
That's pretty hilarious.
I'll go to Disney Tokyo while you go to Cat Islands and we'll meet back up.
Sounds good.
I'll support you from afar.
With my Benadryl and ice that don't water.
I'll make sure to decontaminate before I hang out with you.
Yeah, that's true. All right. Well, that's it for this week. Next week, we are talking about Midnight Mass episodes 4, 5, and 6.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Like what you heard in this episode? Follow Our Nerdiest Thing on Instagram at instagram.com/Our Nerdiest Thing or Facebook at facebook.com/Our Nerdiest Thing. We love hearing from fellow nerds. Email us at ournerdiestthing@gmail.com.